So it had been a while since I did a road trip to Denmark, but I had the opportunity to pick up a couple of pretty special items, one of which is this mid-century dining table by Johannes Andersen, and although this is not necessarily a rare design, it is rare to find one in such good condition, and so I'm pretty excited to see how this thing is going to look with a fresh finish on it. This table is from the same design series as the coffee table I restored in my last video, but instead of battling scratches and stains, in today's video I'll be focusing on one big problem, and that's UV exposure. This is a pretty common problem with vintage furniture, especially when you're dealing with extending tables like this one, where the main tabletop has just seen so much more sunlight than the extension leaves. It's become one of those things that's just sort of accepted in the vintage furniture market, but this table is a true mid-century classic with a solid market value, and so I think it's worth trying to get it right. It looks to me like it's been refinished once, and although I can't be certain, it looks like it could have been finished with shellac, which is also what I'll be using. In any case though, I'm using universal paint stripper here to pull out and remove anything that's in the surface so that I can get any oils or contaminants out and return the wood to a more neutral state before I begin refinishing it. Stripping off the old finish is always the messiest and least fun part of the job for me, and most people wouldn't even bother refinishing a table like this at all, but even though it appears to be in pretty good condition, we can already see the amount of dirt and oil that's being pulled out of the surface, and so by the time I'm done here, I'll hopefully be able to show you that there really is no substitute for a fresh, high quality finish. Once I've scraped off the majority of the stripping gel, I'll continue cleaning the table with a combination of wet wipes and solvents to really lift out the last of the grease and the dirt before I leave it to dry off. With the panels dried off, I can now give them a first pass over with the sanding machine. This is basically just a scuff sand to remove the top layer and really just see what the veneer underneath is looking like in terms of the color and the qualities. Because I'm pretty sure that this table has been refinished once already, I'm being a bit conservative though, and so I'm only using P180 pads on the machine here to make sure that I don't sand the veneer too thin. The main thing I'm trying to figure out right now is how these panels are going to match up in terms of the color tones now that I've stripped and sanded them, because this will determine what steps I take next and how I'm going to approach this project going forward. The colors are definitely closer, but the main tabletop on the right is definitely a few tones darker, with more of a browny red hue to it, while the extension leaf on the left is still lighter and more golden. What I'd like to do with this table is avoid using wood stain, at least for the majority of it, and so instead of using stain to darken the extension leaves, I'm going to use wood bleach to lighten the main tabletop and see if I can bring everything into alignment that way. Once the top's dry, it needs to be wiped down and rinsed off with cold water and then left to dry again before it can be sanded further. While the main top is drying off, I can start work on sanding the extension leaves. These are in pretty good condition, but there are still plenty of little blemishes and imperfections to sand out, along with any residual oils that might be sitting in the surface. And yes, I am sanding the underside of the table here, because although it's not strictly necessary, it's something that I'll always do if I have the time. The general idea is to try and make these vintage pieces look as new as possible, and that rules out having an underside which looks old, messy and discolored when compared to the top. So with the main tabletop dried off now, I can do another light round of sanding to see what impact the bleach has had. I was concerned that this veneer might be getting too thin, but it's actually looking pretty good even after all this sanding and still has plenty of depth and texture left, so it gives me a little more leeway to work with here. The way the oxalic acid treatment works, you need to sand off the top layer after each treatment to remove any leftover residue and basically just get rid of the cloudy, inconsistent look that it often leaves. And so it's only after this point that you can really see how much it has lightened the wood and what kind of color tones you're dealing with. And as you can see here, we've still got a significant discrepancy between the extension leaves and the main tabletop. At this point, it's hard to say how much effect the bleach has actually had, if any, but before I resort to staining, I want to give it one more try with a slightly stronger mix of oxalic acid. In the meantime, it's time to take a look at the leg and apron assemblies. I've already given them a wipe down with solvents as I didn't really feel like the paint stripper was necessary, and what I'm going to do next is just give everything a quick scuff sand with P120 sandpaper to remove that top layer and prepare them for ironing. Although there are a few dents which I'll try to pop out, the main reason I'm doing this is to lift up the wood fibers and make the surface a little easier to sand. This timber is really dense and really oily, and it's not easy to sand at all, so I'm hoping that the ironing will make the job a little easier. In the end, I wasn't able to pull out the dents anyway, and so I just filled them with wood filler and moved on, especially as they're not going to be seen during daily use of the dining table anyway. So even after all the sanding I've done here, I'm noticing that the legs and apron are still looking a bit streaky and patchy, and so I'm going to use some oil-based wood stain to darken them and hopefully get them looking a little tidier and more even. With the stain drying, I'm going to take a look at the tabletop after its second treatment with bleach. Once again, I'll just do a very quick scuff sand with P180 to lift off that very top layer and see what kind of effect the bleach has had. So, definitely lighter, but not light enough, which means that I'll have to use wood stain to get a closer match. But before I stain the full tabletop, I want to stain the edge banding with a darker tone, just to give a little contrast. I don't usually use stain in this way, but I've seen a few tables in this series with the darker edge banding, and I think it looks really good. Unfortunately though, the stain seeped under the masking tape in a few areas, and so now I have to try and manually sand a clean line to try and tidy it up a bit. But because I'll be staining all the tabletops anyway, it shouldn't stand out too much. This has definitely not worked as well as I'd hoped in terms of providing contrast, and it was probably a waste of time in the first place trying to get that kind of contrast with an oil-based stain, but I really try to avoid water-based or dye stains because of the dull and cloudy effect they tend to give. What I'm using here is an oil-based teak wood stain that gives a sort of a classic golden browny red depending on the timber and the concentration. I typically dilute the oil by 50% with mineral turpentine to help it penetrate the wood and leave a much lighter and cleaner sort of a tone. But now that I've stained all the panels with the same stain, I need to darken the extension leaves. Because the main top has so much more red in it, I'll switch to using mahogany wood stain, which has a lot more red in it too, and which should help to bring the colors closer into alignment. It looks like I've got it pretty close here, but you can never really tell until it's fully dried off overnight, and I actually ended up having to darken the main tabletop because the extensions had gotten so much darker. Normally when I use shellac, I just use a folded cloth to wipe it on, but because we're dealing with such a large surface area in this table, I'm making a traditional French polishing pad which will hold a lot more liquid while allowing me to lay it down much more evenly and consistently. I've made up a batch of lemon shellac, which is amber in color and with a moderate wax content, as it's great for giving a bright orange kind of a glow, but without too much gloss or sheen. I've cut the mix down to about 80% alcohol for the first few coats, which will allow me to apply multiple layers quickly without worrying about runs or drips. The great thing about shellac, especially when it's thinly diluted, is that it dries pretty much instantly, and so by the time I've polished one surface, the next one is already dry, and so you can often put 3 to 4 coats down in one session before you need to let it dry off again. For the legs and the apron, there are a lot more tight little corners and much less surface area, and so if I tried to force the pad into some of these areas, it would end up squeezing shellac out all over the place and creating a mess. So using either a brush or a folded cloth is definitely the better option here. As I move through this process, I'm also making minor adjustments to the color as I go, basically just trying to get all the panels to match up a bit better. You can't really see it in this video, and at this stage they're already pretty close, but I'm just gradually pushing them closer together and trying to get the best match possible by modifying the complexion of the shellac with pigment and then glazing the shellac with wood stain if I have to. Most of it is just adding more blonde to the main tabletop while adding more red to the extension leaves, but it is a pretty tedious process that takes a long time because you never really know if the color really matches until each coat dries. And despite all the heavy sanding I did on these parts, I still find the leg and the apron a little patchy and uneven. They haven't really absorbed the stain evenly, and so I'm going to add a little more stain on top of the shellac and just try to darken them a bit more like they were before I sanded them. Another thing I'm going to do to get a better match is to basically add some patina to the main tabletop. With all of the bleaching and sanding, it has come out very clean, almost too clean, and so it has very little contrast and definition on the wood grain compared to the extension leaves, which does make it look a lot lighter by comparison. Once I've sanded and flattened it off, I'll add a generous amount of brie wax, followed by some mineral turpentine. This melts the wax and allows me to work it into all of the pores of the wood grain, which creates a lot more definition and contrast. I'll then keep wiping the excess off the surface so that only the wax in the pores remains, and then continue to add shellac on top to seal it in permanently. My original plan with this table was actually to finish it with a top coat of waterlock satin varnish because it adds a little bit of extra durability to the shellac and I like the gentle sheen it gives. But unfortunately my new can of varnish is still sitting in German customs and nobody can tell me why, and so I've just had to move on without it. That being said, I have compensated by applying extra coats of shellac. The tabletop panels have all got 8 or 9 coats now, and so once they've been thoroughly waxed and allowed to cure and harden, there shouldn't be any problems with durability in the long term. The beeswax polish isn't just for looks though, it's actually a really great lubricant for moving parts and furniture where you've got wood sliding against wood, and so when it comes to restoring a bigger heavy dining table like this one, it's really important to have all of these components sanded, oiled and waxed in order to reduce the friction and make sure that the extensions are actually usable and won't get damaged. This is especially important for the underside of the main tabletop, which will be in direct contact with the top of the extension leaves. I need to make sure that there are no little splinters or anything that might scratch the top of them when they're being pulled out. As far as I can see with the way that this table's been designed, it's intended that you pull the extension straight out without lifting the top up, and so although there are some felt padding strips on the underside, I have to make sure that there is nothing that could cause any damage. But of course, the million-dollar question is, what does the tabletop look like? And I'm happy to say that it all came out pretty well. It'll always look different from different angles, but if the basic tone here isn't the same, then it's as close as you're ever going to get. It was definitely a lot of work, but this is a special table, and I think it was worth the effort. If you've made it this far and you want to support the channel, please do like and subscribe. Until next time though, thanks for watching.